fiddling about with something. Okay, right. Here we are. I've got the chat open on another computer, but I'm going to try and keep looking at it to see if there's any questions I can answer. So if you've got any questions, just write them in the chat, and I shall try and satisfy your curiosity. Quick sip of tea, one moment. Right. So how is everybody? Everybody okay? Let's have a look. Have you ever streamed before this? Somebody asked. Called Lettuce. Nothing. I've not done anything like this before. No. This is going to be a new experience for everyone. What else have we got here? How are you doing, Mr. Cyriak? Asks Erdl. I'm doing very well, thank you. And of course, Fruit Sauce number 9 asks, what kind of drugs do you take before making a video? And I'm taking them right now! And I only drink tea, I'm afraid. Nothing more exciting than a cup of tea. So yeah, I've got some music that's just going to be going on in the background throughout the whole thing, just in case I forget to say anything, which I probably will. I get a little bit distracted sometimes. Random question from Zaza Archeron. Ever thought about doing an album? Cyriak music is seriously good and pretty iconic at this point. Well, do albums still exist these days? It's kind of weird. I've thought about, I don't know, releasing a load of music in a lump like that, and then I just think, well, what happens if I then make another tune? I'd have to kind of add it to it or something like that, and I don't know, everyone just downloads individual MP3s these days, don't they? So probably not is the answer to that. I was kind of surprised though when I was kind of looking through all my tunes to make a playlist, and I've got like over an hour's worth of music somehow. I'm not entirely sure how long I'm going to be doing this this evening, so let me know if you get bored. And I'll let you know if I get bored as well. Okay, is this going to be uploaded on YouTube or Twix? Twix? Don't know what that is, but yeah, I'm going to try and upload it to YouTube at some point. What else do we have here? Have I ever thought about doing something Eldritch or Lovecraft-ish? Well, it's funny. I mean, looking at my stuff, it does look very kind of Lovecrafty, I suppose. I never intentionally make things look like that. I just like kind of making things go weird and fractal, and they just end up looking all horrible and disturbing as a byproduct. Okay, any more questions do we have? How are you so good at making GIFs that loop so perfectly? Well, I've been doing this for a long time, so I guess it's just practice, I suppose. Well, we'll soon see, because I'm going to start showing you stuff in a mo. Did you always work with your music? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. It's just one of those things, because music is kind of highly regulated with regards to copyright, so I always just use my own music just so that I don't have any problems with that kind of thing. And I like my own music better than everyone else's, so it just makes sense. But I've been making music for longer than I've been making animations. Right, I'm just looking at the chat. A face cam. No, I'm not going to put a face cam on this. How long does it take to make a video? Well, let me think. This one in particular, God, I can't remember how long it took me. Maybe like a couple of, it's only short, so it might have only taken like 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 or 3 weeks, or maybe just 2 weeks, I'm not sure. In general though, for a 3-minute video, it's probably going to be about a month, maybe even more than that these days. What kind of tea is your favourite? I just drink normal tea. I can't stand any other kind of tea. Tea just tastes of kind of hot water and leaves, and it shouldn't taste of anything else, I don't think. So how do you make money doing visual effect? Asks somebody. And yes, this is my full-time job. Well, I say full-time, I'm freelance, so I work whenever I get the work. But yeah, I've been doing this for about 10 years now, and I do stuff for music videos, adverts, bits for TV stuff, TV idents, just anything where somebody wants something weird and animated. They just send me an email, and if I'm not busy, then I'll do some work for them. And if they pay me a lot of money as well. Have any animals been harmed in the making of my videos? Not by me, no. I don't think so. Somebody asks, did I study music to make these melodies, or is it all by ear? I never studied music in my life, but I've always been interested in it. But I've always had this problem in that I'm far too lazy to actually learn how to read and write music or play an instrument. So I had to wait for years before computers came along and made everything really easy. Okay, well, let's get on with this. Yeah, I think we've been looking at this screen for long enough. So this is After Effects. Now, I don't know how much you know about this program. I'm assuming a lot of people watching this are familiar with it, maybe even work with it, but some of you might not be. So I'll just briefly explain what you're looking at. After Effects is, I guess you could call it like Photoshop for video. So you got a big window here of what you're actually making, and you've got a timeline down here which shows all the layers that you're working with, and along here this is the timeline. So as you scoot along here, it goes to whatever time. And this panel here is just got all the library of assets that you're going to be using. So any images, video footage, stuff like that goes in there. And there'll be other windows. I mean, this one here just does what's called a RAM preview, where it just renders a little bit for you to see how it's going. So I guess with this I should start back at the beginning. Back at the beginning, let's see, because this is how it finally turned out. But to start with, well, let's see where we started. Aha, right, here we go. So it all starts with a piece of video that I took of a sheep. Let's see if I've got that original video in here. Oh, here we go. So yeah, I just walked into a field one day and there were some lambs frolicking around. There he goes. That's me making that noise, not the lamb. Hello, I am a little lamb. Yeah, this is there's a lot of this going on when I'm making videos. There's his friends. Oh wow, check that one out there. He looks a bit creepy. So yeah, I get this video footage and I take it home and I just go through it trying to find any bits of it that I can use. And of course, one of the things I'm always doing in my videos is making loops of stuff. So I'm always looking for things that I can loop, and I noticed there's a little bit here where he's kind of running along. So the first thing I would do is try and isolate that bit of footage. And see if it actually does loop. So what I do is I just kind of work out 2 points where it kind of looks the same, and I add markers there so that I can flick between them. And then I have adjusted the position to move it, because the whole camera is kind of moving as I'm filming it. So I can move it to make it kind of end up where it begins. And yeah, I was kind of quite lucky with this particular bit of footage that I didn't have to do anything else to it. It just loops as if by magic. So then the next job is to isolate it from the background, and I was a little bit lazy with this and I just used something called key light, which is it's kind of like a chroma key thing where you key out a certain colour. You just pick a colour from the background, and it just makes it all disappear. You can see it's left a kind of an outline around it, which looks a bit shoddy. But I just thought, well, I'm going to stick some more grass behind it anyway, so that's not such a big deal. I thought I'd get away with that. Normally I'd go through a bit more effort to cut things out, but that is a lot of effort doing that. Yeah, animals provide their own green screens. So once I've got this kind of looping sheep, what I do then is I just render that footage into a video and import it again. And the reason I do that is just because I'm lazy, and there it is, lamb run loop it's called. Let me just find it here. Lamb run loop, there it is, yeah. So the reason I do that is because then you can import it, and you can where is it? You've got a setting here to interpret the footage, where you can tell it to loop like 100 times, and it will just give you a really long looping thing. There's probably other ways you could make something loop, but that's just a really kind of lazy way to do it, which I often do. So, is everyone with me so far? Yes, this is After Effects CS5. It does everything I need it to do, so I haven't bothered to update it. And let's see, any other questions I'm missing out? I have to try and... it's difficult to look at two things at once, so... let's have a look if there's any important questions. How do you section off parts of the animal? Right, well, let's come to that. Because once I've got this looping bit of footage, the next thing I do is just try messing about with it. So for example, here we can see his head has been made to kind of turn around, and all I've done there is taken another bit of footage where he's turning his head and just added it. You can see if I turn that mask off, you can see that that's the footage, and he's just turning his head. So all I do is cut out a bit with a mask. And use a few keyframes to move it around and stuff. Yeah, these are the keyframes here. If you're not familiar with what keyframes are, I'll just briefly explain. This I don't know how good the resolution is on this screen, and whether you can actually read any of these little words. But these are position keyframes. You can keyframe most of the attributes of any layer, so position, scale, rotation, etc. And a keyframe is basically telling it how to change between one point in time and another point in time. So every one of these dots along here is a position that the layer is moving to. And what that means is that I can animate it to move along with the body that I'm gluing it onto. And yeah, cutting things out is easy. I mean, most of what I do in After Effects is pretty basic stuff, even though it looks really kind of complicated and crazy. I mean, I often say it's pretty much like using scissors and sellotape to cut things out and move them around. See, if I can just use a tool to draw a shape around something, and that's called a mask. And then you can just chop it out or whatever you want to do. If you want the mask to actually move, to follow the movement of whatever it is you're cutting out, then you have to animate the mask. But that's pretty simple to do as well. It's just keyframes again. And all these points on the mask. Let me just make that mask a little bit more visible. All these dots, oops, you can just move around anywhere you want. Hello, hello. And another thing you can do with masks is you can feather them, feather the edges, which means you can kind of blend things in. So without any feathering, it's just a sharp edge. So if you use a bit of feathering, it helps to blend it into something else. So there you go, it's all very simple stuff. I do sometimes use motion tracking or motion stabilizing. I just didn't in this case because it was such a short piece of footage that it didn't really need any. So yeah, this would probably be literally the first thing I ever did with this. And at this point, as I'm making it, I haven't even thought about making this into an entire video. I'm just playing around. Most of my videos, they just grow out of experiments like this. So again, that's just another bit of the sheep, which I've cut out and just moved around. So that it kind of joins onto the body. So yeah, it's all pretty basic stuff at the moment. Only a few layers involved. But as I go along, I just try more things and I try experimenting, and things get a little bit more complicated. So here we've got legs kind of growing out of his head. Yeah, that does look kind of Lovecraftian. So again, it's just animated masks. You can see all I've done is I've taken a bit of looping footage of the sheep and just cut its legs out. and animated a mask to make them kind of grow. It's fairly simple. And again, these layers are all they've all got kind of position and rotation keyframes to move them around so that they kind of join onto the head. So at this point, I decided I want the neck to grow longer. And this is where things get a little bit more complicated. And what we've got here is a loop that I made. Called sheep head loop. Let's see what that is. Right, so what I've done here is I've just kind of made a loop of the sheep head with legs coming out of it and rendered that as a separate piece of footage just so that I can import it again and mess around with it, because it's easier if I want to move one layer around than a load of layers all joined together. So if it's something that's just going to be looping like that, like this sheep head, then to make my life easier, I just render that loop and then I can turn it from several layers into just one layer. So yeah, and then that can move around and I can make the neck grow. Let's have a look at the neck. I have to say this is probably the first time I've seen this this project file since however long it is I made it. When did I make this? Let me just have a look. 2011, so I haven't looked at this file for 5 years, so this is so I'm learning as much as you guys are at the moment, because I've no memory of how I did any of this. Once I've finished a project, I kind of never want to look at it again. So how did I make that long neck? Let's have a look. It's just lots of sections I can see. Something I have to do in After Effects is color code all my layers, because I can sometimes end up with quite a lot of them. So all these bluey green layers here, they're going to be the neck, and each one of those, let's have a look at one of them. What is that? Some random piece of sheep? Let's have a look. Let's turn the mask off and see what it is. Oh, right, it is just the neck of this sheep. So I've just cut out a little bit of the neck and just glued it together, basically. And what I've also done with these sections is I've used parenting. Parenting, what that means is you're sticking one layer to another layer so that if you move that other layer, the one that's stuck to it moves with it, which saves you a lot of time if you've got a lot of layers that have all got to move in the same way. But what I've done here is that each section of the neck is parented to the one before it. And what that means is that if you change the rotation value for all of the layers at once, it rotates them all relative to each other. So you can get these interesting kind of waggly movements. So this neck is growing very long. Looks like I've also added an adjustment layer, a couple of adjustment layers. Adjustment layers, see, without those it just looks kind of flat and boring, because this sheet doesn't have much of a light source shining on it or anything. So I'll often add a bit of shadow to these things and a highlight there as well, just to make it look a bit more three-dimensional. All adjustment layers are, it's just a kind of a solid layer, and you can add an effect to it. In this case I've added a brightness and contrast effect, but you can add any kind of effect to it, and whatever effect you add, it will affect all the layers underneath it. So very useful. I think, and I actually had to animate that in order to follow the movement of the neck, which is a bit of a pain. So yeah, there's more than meets the eye with these things. Looks like there's a shadow behind that head as well. Let's have a look. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so I'm always doing bits like that just to try and make these things look a little bit more three-dimensional. Because the problem with working with photos and cut out video footage even is that it can end up looking a little bit flat. So it helps to give things a bit of depth. Right, someone asks me about anchor points. Where do I place the anchor point of each section of neck? Let's have a look. If you're going to be rotating something, then the anchor point is the point around which it rotates. So So because this bit of neck is kind of moving around, it can make things a bit weird. But usually it would be kind of around there. But there's always a lot of kind of juggling and experimentation to get things right. A lot of trial and error. And sometimes happy accidents as well. I mean, I didn't even have to animate the anchor points for any of these neck sections, and normally you'd probably want to do that, but because I haven't, and they're all moving around in synchronization, it makes it all throb in that weird way. You can see how it's all kind of moving. So if the anchor points were all solidly in place, then that wouldn't happen. So that kind of adds a nice bit of living movement to it. But yeah, anchor points, you can move them with keyframes just like anything else. So, for example, if I get let's just make a solid layer here. So there's the anchor point there. Let's make this a different colour actually, just so you can see better. So yeah, you got the anchor point is that point there, and it will rotate around that point, and it will scale around that point. But you can move the anchor point around. If you use the pan behind tool, you can actually grab the anchor point and change its position. Or you can just move these values here, and then it will rotate around that point. And then if you animate the anchor point moving, which is something I don't usually do, but then it kind of moves along the anchor point. But yeah, that's how that works. Yeah, I don't use any kind of scripting. I probably should. I'd probably make my life a lot easier if I did, but a lot of this is I'm making things up as I go along, and I'm just stumbling on things. And scripting, you kind of have to know in advance what you're doing, I think. Whereas with this more hands-on approach, you get more kind of improvisation going on. What are all these layers here? They're not even visible. What is that? You see, this is what I mean by experimentation. I've obviously tried something and it didn't quite work. So I made a long kind of worm. So yeah, I try things out. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And if they don't, and I think, well, they might work in future, I might have another look at them. So I just make the layers invisible and figure I'll come back to it later. And in this case, I didn't. What's happening here? Oh yeah, one thing I should mention actually is that my computer sometimes crashes and stops working. So if that happens, well, I'm just telling you that might happen. So beware. If the stream just stops moving, then there you go. So what's going on here? This creature has kind of fallen out of the neck. Neck segment 2 it's called. Let's have a look at that. So this is what we call pre-composition, where this layer here is actually another composition. A composition is basically what you're looking at. It's all these layers and what you can see on the screen here. But you can put other compositions inside compositions. So that's what this is. So at some point I thought to myself, right, I need a monster coming out of the neck. So let's go into another composition and make a monster. And here it is. What a lovely, lovely creature. Yeah. Tail. The tail. Even that tail is a composition. I've just, let's have a look. So yeah, that tail was far too interesting to not make use of. So I've just chopped it out and repeated it. All these layers here are just the same bit of footage repeating. So it's this waggly, horrible sheep's bottom with the weird tail. Oh, that's amazing. So once you have a tail, flailing tentacles, and sheep's head, and you can just glue them all together. What's this? Sorry, I'm just wondering what this layer here is. Let's just isolate that. Oh, what is that? It's just kind of weird. Oh, I know what that is. Or do I? Ah, right, I've got it. I know. It's a sheep! I've just taken a little section of this sheep here, and rather than cutting it out with a mask, I've cut it out with a matte layer. What that means is you can just make a layer, any layer you like. What I've made here is just this black shape, and you can tell the layer directly underneath it to use the alpha channel of that layer. Alpha channels are basically, it's the see-through bits. So what that does is it means that the layer underneath, you can only see what the layer above it is showing. And that is a really bad way of explaining it. But I'll probably explain that more in another stream when I'm using it more, because I use that a lot with cutting complicated things out. But I don't really cut anything complicated out in this particular video. So yeah, I don't use any. I didn't use any plugin to make the neck go weird. It's all just cutting things out and moving them around. I don't actually use that many plugins, but when I do, I'll mention it. So yeah, the creature plops onto the floor and moves away. Let's have another look at this. It's got some mesh warping going on. Mesh warp is a distortion tool that I use a lot. So let's have a closer look. So with that turned off, it's not distorting at all, and it's just kind of moving to the floor. But what you can do with the mesh warp is you can grab all these points and move them around, and it's just distorts it like that. And there are a lot of other tools for doing this kind of thing. But I use this one in particular just because it gives me a lot of control for animating the warps. And you can see here I've animated the distortion until it hits the ground, and then it kind of goes back to normal, as if this thing has just kind of flopped onto the ground. So let's see that in action. Plop. There you go. And there's a little shadow underneath him. What's the neck doing? It looks like there's some kind of a horrible mouth on the end of it. I think that might be what this is. Let's have a look at this. Wow, that's grim. Throbbing mouth. Let me just render that so we can see. Let's put that at full resolution. That's lovely. Yeah, so everything in this video I wanted to make out of this sheep. So if I wanted a mouth to open, I had to make it out of the sheep, bits of its body. So you can see I've used, there's the side of its head there. Well, I've just chopped out its ear, and its ear is now a tooth of the mouth. And there's a kind of a black shadow in there. And again, I'm using distortion, the mesh warp tool there. This keyframe here is, it says time remap. What all that is I've just freeze framed a bit of the video footage that I wanted. So for example, if I wanted this particular frame of this video, I could just go to time, freeze frame, and it adds this keyframe here, and that means it just freezes on that particular frame, and then it's just like a still photograph then, which you can play around with. So I had to do that because I'm using video footage, and sometimes I need to have something that doesn't move around everywhere. So the mouth is there, the tail, neck segments. Let's go back here and see what's going on. Right, so the neck has a weird mouth on the end, and out of the mouth comes one of the monsters. So there's the monster that's coming out. And I've used a matte layer to cut it out.